The blood donor. I used to work nights in the ER over in Boone County, third shift nurse. We saw it all: overdoses, car wrecks, hunting accidents, even the occasional bar fight gone wrong. You get numb to a lot of things after a while. But there's one night I can't shake, and I don't think I ever will. It started out slow. Just a couple of sprained ankles and a guy who cut his hand open trying to fix his lawnmower after dark. Around midnight, I was behind the nurse's station when this man walked in. Tall, skinny, pale, like he hadn't seen the sun in months. He wasn't hurt, at least not that I could see. He just walked right up to the desk and said, calm as could be, "I need to give blood." At first, I thought maybe he was just confused. I said, "Sir, this isn't a donation center. This is the emergency room." But he just stared at me with these dark eyes. Not brown, dark, almost black. And he said it again. "I need to give blood, now." My charge nurse came over, tried to redirect him, told him about the Red Cross drive that was happening the next day at the community center. But this guy wasn't hearing it. He leaned forward on the counter, and I'll never forget the way his lips barely moved when he spoke. "It can't wait. You have to take it tonight." Now, normally, security would have been called right then, but something about him. It didn't feel like a threat, not exactly. More like a warning. My charge nurse sighed, gave me a look, and whispered, "Just get him a room. Let's draw a pint and send him on his way." So I walked him back. He followed me without a word. No limp, no stumble, nothing. His steps didn't even sound right, like his shoes didn't connect fully with the floor. We got him in a room, set him up, tied the band around his arm. His veins popped up clear as day. That part was easy. But when I slid the needle in, the blood that came out wasn't normal. It was thick, dark, almost syrupy, and it filled the bag faster than I had ever seen. He watched me the whole time, never blinking, never looking away. After the first pint, I said, "All right, that should do it." But he shook his head. "More." I told him we couldn't do that. It wasn't safe. He leaned in closer, his face just inches from mine. His skin smelled like damp earth, like dirt after a rain. "It isn't for me. It's for it." I froze. "For what?" He didn't answer, just motioned to the bag. Against my better judgment, I started another one. I don't know why. Maybe it was the way his voice felt heavy in the room, or the way my hands moved before my brain told them to. We filled a second bag, then a third. By the end, I was sweating, my hands shaking. He didn't flinch once. 3 full bags of that thick, dark blood lined up like offerings. Finally, he sat back, took a long, slow breath, and said, "That should keep it fed for a while." I couldn't stop myself. I asked, "Keep what fed?" He smiled, just barely, and it was the kind of smile that doesn't touch the eyes. "You'll see." And with that, he stood up, pulled the IV out himself, no hesitation, no wince, no blood left behind, just a perfect little pinprick in his skin that closed right up. He gathered the bags, all 3 of them, into a black satchel he'd carried in. I swear I never even noticed it until then. He slung it over his shoulder, nodded once to me, and walked right out the door. Didn't check out, didn't pay, just gone. I went to the station to tell my charge nurse what happened, but before I even opened my mouth, she said, "Don't." I blinked at her. "Don't what?" She shook her head, her face pale. "You don't talk about this. Ever. You'll sleep better that way." And then she went back to charting like nothing had happened. I tried to convince myself it was some weird night. Maybe I'd been overtired. But about a week later, I was driving home and I passed the old coal road on the edge of the county. No one uses it anymore. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him. That same man, standing at the tree line, his satchel slung over his shoulder. He was pouring something into the ground. 3 guesses what? I didn't stop. Didn't look twice. I just pressed the gas and got the hell out of there. And the strangest part, the next night at work, a farmer came in with his kid, said something had slaughtered half their goats, not eaten, just killed, blood drained clean. When the kid described what he saw near the pen, his words stuck with me. It was tall, too tall, and its eyes were black. I don't know if what I saw that night in the ER is connected, but I'll tell you this. When someone comes in saying they need to give blood, I don't ask questions anymore. Not out loud, anyway.
The Creature in the Bed. When I was a kid, maybe 8 or 9, my grandma would tell me stories before bed. Some were Bible stories, some were old mountain legends, and some she swore were true. There's one she told me that I can't shake, and I think about it way too often. She said it happened when she was a girl back in the 40s, living in a 2-room cabin with her brothers and sisters. The kids all slept in one room, 3 beds lined up against the wall. It was tight living, but that was just how it was back then. One night, she woke up to the sound of her younger sister crying. Not loud, just little sniffles. Grandma sat up and whispered, "What's wrong?" Her sister pointed to the bed across the room. "I don't like her," she said. Grandma squinted through the dark. Her older sister was fast asleep in the bed. Nothing strange about it. "You're just dreaming," Grandma whispered. "No," her sister said, shaking her head. "Not her. Her." And she pointed again. That's when Grandma noticed something. The bed wasn't empty. Someone else was laying there, on top of the covers, curled up like they were sleeping. Only it wasn't her sister. It looked wrong, too long, arms bent funny, legs hanging off the side of the mattress, and its head, Grandma said the head was turned toward the wall, like it was hiding its face. Grandma's heart was pounding. She whispered, "Who's that?" But her little sister just pulled the blanket over her head and said, "She came in after you went to sleep. She crawled out from under the bed." Grandma stared at the figure, trying to convince herself it was just a blanket bunched up, or maybe a trick of the shadows. But then it moved. Slow, like it was stretching. One arm bent backward, completely the wrong way, and the hand slipped down to the floor. The fingers scraped against the wood, long and thin like sticks. Grandma froze. She wanted to scream for her mama, but she was scared that if she yelled, the thing would look at her. And then it did. Its head rolled toward her. She said its face wasn't right, eyes too wide, mouth too wide, like it was trying to copy a person but didn't quite know how. And it smiled. That was enough. Grandma bolted out of bed, grabbed her little sister, and ran screaming into the next room where her parents were. Her daddy came storming in with a lantern, ready to raise hell. He threw open the bedroom door, shining light straight on the bed. Nothing.
The covers were smooth, like nobody had ever laid there. But her daddy frowned, walked over and knelt down. When he lifted the quilt and looked under the bed, he turned pale. He said, "Everybody out," real low. The kids didn't argue. They bolted out into the night, while their mama tried to ask what was going on. Their daddy didn't answer, just grabbed his rifle and went back inside. Grandma never forgot the sound that came next, a scraping, dragging noise, like claws on wood. Then a slam so loud the windows rattled. And then silence. Her daddy came out a few minutes later, face white as chalk. He told them, "We're not sleeping in that house tonight." The whole family walked down the road to her aunt's place and never went back to that cabin again, left everything inside. When Grandma told me this story, I asked her if her daddy ever said what he saw under that bed. She just shook her head and said, "He never talked about it, but we moved the next week and I've never slept with my feet uncovered since." And then she looked me dead in the eyes and said, "If you ever wake up and see someone lying in your bed that shouldn't be there, don't say a word, don't look it in the face, just get out."
The Man with the Coyote Bite. I was about halfway through my night shift at the ER when the doors banged open and 2 EMTs wheeled in a man on a gurney. The first thing that hit me wasn't what I saw. It was the smell. Wet dog, mud, and blood. One of the EMTs, a younger guy who looked like he wanted to be anywhere but here, said, "Coyote attack. Happened in his yard." The man on the gurney was mid-30s, jeans shredded from the knees down, boots caked in mud. His right arm was wrapped in thick gauze, and whatever was under there had bled clean through. I asked, "What happened exactly?" The guy just stared at me. His eyes were pale yellow, almost washed out, and I thought maybe he was in shock. The older EMT leaned closer and said quietly, "Bite pattern's weird. Doesn't match a dog or coyote." We got him into a room, cut away the rest of his sleeve, and started unwrapping the gauze. When I saw the wound, my stomach knotted. It wasn't torn like an animal bite. It was clean, too clean. Like a human mouth, except the teeth marks were too long, too sharp, and they'd sunk deep enough to scrape bone. I asked, "You sure it wasn't a dog?" The man's voice was low and gravelly. It wasn't no dog. It was my brother. I froze. "Your brother bit you?" He shook his head slowly. "Not anymore. Not for a long time." Before I could ask what that meant, the heart monitor beeped. His pulse was climbing. Sweat poured down his face. I called for the doctor, but the man grabbed my wrist with a grip far too strong for someone that pale. He said, "You need to lock the doors. It followed me here." I pulled free, trying to keep my voice calm. "We'll take care of you, but you need to stay in the bed." The doc came in, gave him something for the pain, and started cleaning the wound. When the light hit it, the skin around the bite looked wrong, blackened. The veins near it seemed to be moving under the skin. About 15 minutes later, the power flickered. Every monitor beeped at once. That's when we heard it, a low, drawn-out howl from outside the ambulance bay. The doc froze. So did I. The man whispered, "It's here." I sent an orderly to check the doors, but he came back pale. There's someone out there, just standing." I went over. The figure was about 30 yards away, at the edge of the light. It was the man from the other night, same jeans, same boots, but his shirt was gone, and his skin looked stretched, too tight over the bones, like he'd lost 20 pounds in 3 days. I opened the side door a crack. "Sir, you need to come inside." His head tilted in this slow, unnatural way, like he was trying to understand the words. Then he smiled. The same pale yellow eyes stared back at me, and his teeth looked longer. "It's hungry,"
he said. Before I could ask what he meant, something moved in the shadows behind him, low to the ground, fast. I caught a glimpse. Long limbs, dark fur, head too big for its body. The man said, "Told you to lock the doors." Then he stepped back into the dark. That's when the thing behind him darted forward, not at him, but at us. I slammed the door shut and threw the deadbolt. The nurse was already calling security. We heard claws on the metal, scratching high up like it was climbing. Then a heavy thump on the roof. For 10 minutes we just stood there listening to it pace above us. When it finally stopped, security did a sweep. Nothing. No tracks. But when I walked back to the nurse's station, there was a folded piece of paper sitting on my chair. On the front, in shaky handwriting, were 3 words. "It knows you."
The wrong reflection. I was living in a little rental cabin out near the edge of Clay County. One of those places folks build for hunting season and then rent out when they're not using it. It wasn't fancy. 2 rooms, a kitchen, and a bathroom that always smelled a little damp, no matter how much bleach I poured down the drain. The only thing I didn't like was the mirror. It hung in the hallway between the kitchen and the bedroom. Big, heavy thing with a wooden frame carved up with little crosses and swirls. You couldn't take it down either. I tried once. Thing was bolted straight into the wall like it was meant to never leave. First couple of weeks, nothing strange happened. I was just trying to get settled. But then, little things started catching my eye. Like one morning, I walked past it with my coffee, and I swear I saw myself still standing there after I'd gone by. Just a flicker, but enough to make me stop. I backed up, looked right at the glass. My reflection was normal, but my skin was crawling. I told myself it was nothing, just me being tired. But a few nights later, I was brushing my teeth when I noticed something off. My reflection wasn't brushing in time with me. The rhythm was just a little delayed. I'd raise the brush, and a half-second later, the reflection would follow. I leaned in closer, squinting at the mirror, when the reflection leaned in too, but its eyes were wrong. Too dark, too wide. I dropped the brush and stumbled back. The reflection smiled. I didn't. That was the first night I didn't sleep. Over the next week, it got worse. Sometimes I'd walk by the mirror and catch a glimpse of myself, only it wasn't me. My hair was parted the wrong way, or my shirt had writing on it that I wasn't wearing. One night, it looked like me, but with dirt smeared across my face like I'd been digging. The night that really broke me was a Friday. I'd been out late, driving home from work, and I got back around midnight. The cabin was quiet, pitch dark, except for the moonlight coming in through the windows. I walked past that damn mirror, trying not to look, but I couldn't help it. There I was, standing in the glass. Only problem was, I wasn't moving. I froze in the hallway, staring. My reflection was just standing there, grinning ear to ear. Not moving with me, not blinking, just grinning. And then slowly, it raised its hand and tapped on the inside of the glass. 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. I dropped my keys, heart racing. I whispered, "What the hell are you?" And my reflection, me, but not me, mouthed the words, "Let me in." That was it for me. I grabbed an old quilt, threw it over the mirror, and nailed it in place. I didn't care if the landlord complained. I wasn't looking at that thing again. For a few days it worked. I started to relax. Until one night, about a week later, I woke up to a noise. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was coming from the hallway. I grabbed a flashlight, forced myself up, and stepped out of the bedroom. The quilt was still nailed over the mirror, but it was moving, tugging outwards like something underneath was trying to push through. I stood there, frozen, flashlight shaking in my hand. The scratching stopped. Then, in a low voice, muffled through the blanket, I heard, "You can't hide forever." I bolted, grabbed my keys, jumped in the truck, and drove straight to my sister's place 2 towns over. Didn't even pack a bag. When I finally worked up the nerve to tell her, she went pale. She said, "That old mirror? I've seen it before. Belonged to a preacher's family. Story goes his wife said the mirror showed her things that weren't real. She claimed her other self wanted to take her place. Folks said she lost her mind and, well, she didn't make it." I asked what happened to the mirror. She said they bolted it into the wall so nobody else could take it out of the house. I never went back for my stuff. Just told the landlord to keep the deposit and walked away. But every once in a while, when I'm passing by a storefront window at night, I swear I see it. That same grin, just behind my shoulder, like it's waiting.
The screaming from the basement. This one didn't happen to me, but to a buddy of mine named Josh. He swears on his life it's true, and the way he told it stuck with me enough that I still think about it. Josh grew up in an old farmhouse outside of town, one of those places with slanted floors, doors that never shut right, and a stone basement that stayed damp year-round. You know the type. Now, his parents didn't use the basement for much. A washer, a dryer, and some shelves full of canning jars. That was about it. The stairs down there were steep and half-rotted, so most of the time they just stayed upstairs. One night, Josh was about 16, sitting in the living room watching TV while his folks were asleep. The house was quiet. He told me he almost dozed off when he heard something. A scream. He said it wasn't faint, wasn't muffled. It was loud, sharp, echoing up through the vents in the floor. And it wasn't just a quick yell either. It went on for a good 5 seconds. Josh sat up straight, heart pounding. He muted the TV and listened. Silence. Then, a minute later, another scream, louder this time. It came from directly beneath him. The basement, he thought. Now, he wanted to believe it was just some kind of pipe noise, or maybe an animal got down there. But he told me, "Man, I know what a scream sounds like, and that was a person." He got up, grabbed a flashlight, and crept to the basement door. The air coming from under that door was cold, colder than the rest of the house. He stood there for a long time debating, before finally pulling the door open. The stairs yawned down into the dark. He clicked on his flashlight and started down. He said every step creaked, and the screaming started again. But now it wasn't just one voice. It sounded like 2, maybe 3 people, crying and begging, but too garbled to understand. Josh froze halfway down. His gut was screaming at him to go back up, but his legs kept moving. When he reached the dirt floor, his light swept across the basement. Washer, dryer, jars. Nothing else. Then the sound cut off. He stood there, flashlight trembling in his hand, listening. Nothing but the drip of water somewhere in the corner. "Hello?" he called, his voice cracking. No answer. He backed up toward the stairs, every hair on his neck standing straight up. Just as he put his foot on the first step, the screams came back, but this time, right behind him. He spun around, light shaking over bare stone walls. The screams were deafening, filling the whole basement, and mixed in with them was a low, rumbling sound. Then the flashlight died. Josh said he bolted up those stairs in the dark faster than he thought he could move. He slammed the basement door shut and shoved the couch in front of it. His parents came running out asking what the hell was going on, but when he tried to explain, his dad just looked at him like he was crazy. His mom checked the basement herself the next morning, said it was fine, nothing unusual. But Josh swore he never went back down there again. If his laundry needed done, he carried it over to a friend's house. He wouldn't even open the basement door. The weirdest part, a couple months later, his family finally moved out. New folks bought the place. Josh said one night he was walking past that old farmhouse and saw the new owner out front smoking a cigarette. He went over, just being friendly, and asked him how the house was treating him. The guy gave him this look and said, "Do you know anything about the basement? My wife swears she hears people screaming down there at night." Josh just shook his head and said, "Yeah, that sounds about right."
The patient who recognized everyone. I heard this one from a nurse who used to work night shift at a little hospital tucked deep in the mountains. She doesn't tell the story often because it still gives her chills, but she swears every word of it's true. It started like a normal shift. Around 2 in the morning, the ER doors opened and a man walked in. No ambulance, no police escort, just him. She said he looked maybe late 40s, pale as paper, wearing old clothes like he'd been out in the woods all day. He walked up to the counter, leaned in and said, "I don't feel right." That's not unusual in itself. Plenty of folks walk in with vague complaints. But she told me the look in his eyes was off, like he knew something nobody else did. They took him back to a room, hooked him up to the monitor. Blood pressure was normal, heart rate steady. He didn't look hurt, didn't seem sick. Just kept sitting there, looking around at everyone. Here's where it got strange. Every time a nurse, tech, or doctor walked in, he greeted them by name. The first nurse came in to take his vitals. Before she even introduced herself, he said, "Thanks, Linda." She froze. "Do I know you?" she asked. The man just smiled. "Not yet." She figured maybe he'd seen her around town, small community. Word gets around. She brushed it off. But then another nurse came in. He said her name too. She wasn't local, just moved to the area a couple months before. He smiled at her and said, "Hey, Michelle." Michelle asked, "Do you work here or something?" He shook his head. "No, but I know you." Over the next hour, everyone who stepped in that room, orderlies, lab techs, even a janitor, he greeted them by name. No hesitation, no mistakes. Finally, the doctor walked in, and the guy looked at him and said, "Dr. Williams, been waiting for you." Now the doctor knew for sure he'd never met this man. He'd only been in town for 6 months. "Do we know each other?" he asked. The patient leaned forward, still smiling. "Not yet." The staff started whispering about it at the desk. Nobody could figure it out. He had no ID on him, nothing in his pockets, not even a wallet. When they asked where he was from, he just said, "I'm from here, same as you." But here's the part that shook them the most. Around 4 a.m., a nurse's aide walked in to check on him. She was only 18, brand new to the job. Nobody knew her outside of work. She commuted in from an hour away. She stepped into the room, and before she said a word, the man looked right at her and said, "Don't go home tomorrow. Stay here, please." She stammered, "Why would you say that?" He just shook his head. "Because I know what happens. I know all of you." By this point, everyone thought maybe he was psychotic, maybe hallucinating. They decided to keep him for observation until morning. At 6 a.m., shift change came. New staff arrived. The man greeted them too. All of them. Every single one. By name. Finally, after breakfast trays went out, the charge nurse went to check on him. She opened the door, and the bed was empty. He was gone. They searched the halls, the bathrooms, even the parking lot. Nothing. No sign of him. The monitors were still hooked up like he'd never been there. Here's the kicker, though. 2 days later, that young aide who he warned, she didn't show up for her shift. Everyone assumed she'd quit. Later, they found out she'd been in a bad car wreck on the road home.
The same stretch he told her not to drive. She survived, but barely. The staff don't talk about that patient much. Some say he was a ghost. Some say he was something else, something that knows more than we do. But the nurse who told me the story, she still works night shift. And every time those ER doors swing open after midnight, she braces herself, half expecting him to walk back in.
The Hollow-Eyed Boy. This one comes from a paramedic who worked out of a small Appalachian town where most of their calls were car wrecks, farm accidents, or overdoses. He swears up and down that what he saw one night wasn't just a creepy kid. It was something else. He and his partner got a call around 2 a.m. for a disturbance. Normally, paramedics don't get called for that kind of thing. That's more a police matter. But the dispatcher said the caller sounded hysterical, claiming there was a child in her yard who wouldn't go away. When they pulled up, the woman was standing on her porch in her robe, chain-smoking, looking rattled. She pointed toward the tree line at the edge of her yard. "He's been standing there for 20 minutes," she said. "I told him I'd call the police, but he just keeps staring." The medic walked over a little closer to the trees, shining his flashlight. That's when he saw him. A boy. Couldn't have been more than 10 years old. Skinny, pale, wearing clothes that looked off, like hand-me-downs from 30 years ago. Suspenders, a collared shirt, pants too short for his legs. The boy didn't move, didn't flinch at the light in his face. Just stood there with his arms at his sides. "Hey, buddy, you lost? Do you need help?" No answer. His partner walked up beside him. "Maybe he's deaf," he whispered. So the medic tried again, louder this time. "You okay? Where's your family?" The boy tilted his head just slightly. That's when the medic noticed his eyes. There weren't any. Just hollow black pits where his eyes should have been. Not dark irises, not shadows, holes, like the sockets were empty. The medic swore every hair on his body stood straight up. He took a step back without even meaning to. His partner muttered, "What the hell?" Then the boy spoke. His voice was flat, like he was repeating lines he didn't understand. "It's cold out here. Can I come inside?" The woman on the porch shouted, "No, don't let him in!" The boy turned his head toward her, though he shouldn't have been able to see her. Then he looked back at the medics and said, "I'm so hungry." The medic said his gut was screaming at him to get away. He reached for his radio, planning to call dispatch and get law enforcement there, but when he glanced back up, the boy was gone. No running, no sound of footsteps, just gone. The three of them, 2 grown men and the woman, stood there in silence for a good minute, scanning the tree line with flashlights. Nothing moved. Finally, the woman whispered, "That wasn't a boy. He's been here before." That's when she told them something she hadn't mentioned on the phone. She said for years, people in the holler had told stories about the hollow-eyed boy who showed up at night asking to be let inside. Her grandmother had warned her, never say yes, never open the door. He's not what he looks like. The medic thought she was just superstitious, but then she pointed down at the ground near the tree line. There were footprints in the mud, small, barefoot prints. They went a few feet into the woods and then stopped, just ended. The medics cleared the scene, told the woman to lock her doors, and drove off. Neither of them talked the whole way back to the station. But here's the part that sticks. 2 weeks later, the same medic was driving home from a late shift. He lived on a back road deep in the hills. No street lights, no neighbors close by. He came around a curve, and his headlights caught something on the side of the road. It was a boy. Skinny, pale, clothes too small. And when the medic slowed down, the boy turned toward him, hollow, black sockets where his eyes should be. The medic hit the gas and didn't look back. He doesn't tell that story to patients, barely tells it to friends, but he told it once at a bar to a stranger sitting next to him. After a couple of drinks, the medic said, "If you're driving through these mountains at night and you see a boy on the side of the road, don't stop. Don't talk to him. Just keep driving."
The patient with the black veins. I worked night shifts in a small ER tucked away in the Appalachian Mountains. You see a little bit of everything out here. Hunting accidents, coal mining injuries, ATV wrecks. But one night I saw something that stuck with me for years. Something I still can't explain. It was around 2 in the morning when they wheeled him in. Middle-aged man, maybe mid-40s, brought in by his wife. She said he'd woken up sweating and shivering, complaining of chest pain and shortness of breath. At first I thought it sounded like a heart attack. That's what she thought too. But when I pulled the blanket back, I saw his arms. His veins were black. Not bruised, not blue, not that purplish color you see when someone's oxygen is low. I mean black. Running up from his hands, along his arms, and creeping toward his chest like ink under the skin. I froze for a second before calling over the attending doc. He came in, took one look, and his face went pale. "Let's get IV access, cardiac monitoring, the works," he said. But when I tried to slide a needle in, his blood, God, I can still see it. It was thick, dark, like oil, not normal blood at all. The man groaned, eyes rolling, whispering something I couldn't catch. His wife leaned in close and said, "Honey, it's okay, they're gonna fix you up." But then she looked up at us, panicked, and said, "This started 2 days ago. First, it was just his fingertips turning black. Then it spread. I thought it was circulation. He wouldn't come in. He said it was just the mountains taking back what's theirs." That line made my stomach flip. We ran labs, sent blood down to the lab tech. The poor kid came back 20 minutes later, wide-eyed. "It's coagulated," he said, "like it's already clotted in the vial. I've never seen anything like it." Meanwhile, the patient was getting worse. His veins kept darkening, spreading across his chest and neck. He started coughing, and when he did, black fluid came out. Not blood, not vomit, just black. The doctor ordered broad-spectrum antibiotics, thinking maybe some kind of weird sepsis, but it didn't touch it. Nothing we did made a difference. The monitor showed his heart racing, then dropping, racing again. He grabbed my wrist once, squeezed hard, and whispered, "Don't let her follow me." I asked him, "Who? Who's following you?" But his eyes were glassy, already fading. His wife started sobbing, saying over and over, "This isn't supposed to happen again." We pressed her, asking what she meant, but she just shook her head. At 3:12 a.m., he flatlined. We tried everything, compressions, epi, shocking him. Nothing brought him back. After 20 minutes, the doctor called it. Time of death, 3:32. Here's where it gets worse. When we covered him with the sheet, his wife let out this scream I'll never forget. Not a cry of grief, a scream like she'd just seen something. She pointed at his arm. The veins that had turned black, they were fading, disappearing. Within 5 minutes, his body looked normal, pale, lifeless, but no trace of what we just watched consume him. The doctor looked at me and said quietly, "Don't write that in the chart." Just like that. Like if we didn't document it, it didn't happen. But I can't unsee it. Later, when I was cleaning up, the wife came up to me. Her eyes were red, face streaked with tears. She whispered,
It runs in his family. They called it the black veins. His grandfather died the same way. They always said it wasn't a sickness, it was a curse. I didn't know what to say. She left before morning, didn't even stay for the coroner. The official paperwork just says cardiac arrest, but I know what I saw, and I know what I heard that man whisper before he died. Don't let her follow me. And some nights, when I'm leaving the hospital after a long shift, walking to my car in the dark, I swear I hear footsteps behind me.
The Woman in White. I used to work late nights driving a delivery truck through the back roads of West Virginia. Not long hauls, just county to county, but it was enough to make you feel like the only person alive some nights. One night, I was cutting through a stretch of road that ran alongside the river. If you've ever driven those roads, you know what I'm talking about. Sharp turns, no street lights, trees leaning right over the asphalt like they're waiting to swallow you. It was about 1:30 in the morning. The fog was hanging low, the kind that makes your headlights bounce back at you. I was sipping bad gas station coffee when I saw her. A woman, standing on the side of the road. She was wearing a long white dress, the kind you'd see in an old photograph. Her hair was dark, loose, and messy. I slowed down without even thinking, because who the hell is standing on that road at that hour? My first thought was maybe she'd been in an accident. Maybe her car broke down. I rolled the window down a crack and called out, "Hey, you okay?" She didn't answer, just looked at me. And let me tell you, there was something about her eyes. Not like they were glowing or anything Hollywood, just empty, staring, like she wasn't really looking at me, but through me. I pulled over. Something in my gut told me not to, but it felt wrong to just leave her there. I got out of the truck, kept the door open in case I needed to jump back in. "Ma'am, do you need help?" That's when she lifted her arm and pointed down the road. Not at me, not at the truck, just down the dark stretch ahead. I looked, but there was nothing there, just more fog and tree line. When I turned back, she was gone. Not walking away, not running, just gone. I froze, trying to make sense of it. I thought maybe the fog had played tricks on me. Maybe I'd imagined her. I got back in the truck, locked the doors, and told myself to just keep driving. About 2 miles down, I came to a curve, tight one, right along the river. I slowed down, and there it was. A car, crumpled against a tree, half hidden in the ditch, headlights barely glowing. I slammed the brakes and pulled over, ran to the car, heart in my throat. Inside was a guy, maybe mid-20s, airbag deployed, windshield cracked. He was slumped forward, barely conscious. I called 911, yelling into the phone while I tried to get the door open. He was alive, hurt bad, but alive. Later, after the ambulance came and took him, the deputy on scene told me, "You're lucky you stopped. Another hour in this cold, he wouldn't have made it." I didn't tell him about the woman. Didn't tell anyone for a while. But here's the part that still gives me chills. A few weeks later, I mentioned it to an older guy at a diner I stop at. I said, "Ever hear of someone seeing a woman in white out on River Road?" He put his fork down slow and said, "You saw her too?" I nodded. He leaned closer and said, "That's not the first time she's pointed somebody toward a wreck. Story goes, she was killed on that stretch back in the 1950s. Car went into the river. They never pulled her body out. Folks say she's still out there, making sure nobody else dies the way she did." I didn't sleep right for days after that, because I couldn't stop thinking, if she hadn't been there, if I hadn't stopped, that kid in the car would be dead. And if she can point the way to accidents before anyone else finds them, that means she's still watching. Every time I drive that stretch now, I keep one eye on the fog. And sometimes, I swear I see her dress in the corner of my headlights.
The patient who wouldn't stay dead. This comes from a nurse who worked nights in a small hospital in eastern Kentucky. She swears what she saw wasn't stress or sleep deprivation. It was real. She said the ER was quiet that night, just one of those shifts where you're mostly keeping yourself awake with bad coffee and paperwork. Around 2 a.m., an ambulance pulled up with a man in his late 40s. He'd been found in his trailer, not breathing. Paramedics had worked him for 20 minutes on the way in, but he was gone, flatlined. They called time of death at 2:23 a.m. The nurse did the usual, cleaned him up, zipped him in the bag, logged the time. Nothing unusual. She rolled him into the holding room, locked the door, and went back to the desk. Maybe 45 minutes later, she heard a noise, a thump. At first she thought it was a gurney rolling down the hall, but when she looked up, the hallway was empty. Then she heard it again, louder this time, coming from the holding room. She tried to tell herself it was nothing. Buildings like that creak, pipes knock, doors shift. But then there was a third sound, a dragging noise. She grabbed another nurse. "Hey, do you hear that?" The second nurse cocked her head. "Sounds like somebody moving." They walked to the holding room together, trying to laugh it off. The first nurse slid her key into the lock, pushed the door open. The body bag was open. The man was sitting up on the gurney. His head tilted toward them, eyes wide, mouth half open, like he was trying to say something but couldn't. The second nurse gasped, "Oh my God!" and ran out. The first nurse froze. She said the man's chest wasn't rising, no breath, but his eyes were locked on hers. Then he swung his legs off the gurney. His feet hit the floor with that dragging sound she'd heard. He stood up, slow, shaky, and took one step toward her. She snapped out of it, bolted out the door, and slammed it shut behind her. When she caught up with the other nurse, they called the doctor on duty. He came running, annoyed, muttering about nerves and hallucinations. But when they got back to the holding room and opened the door, the man was gone. Not lying down, not sitting up. Gone. They checked the whole wing. Nothing. Security checked the cameras too. And that's where it gets worse. On the footage, you can see the two nurses open the holding room door. You can see one run off, the other freeze. But there's no man. The gurney's empty. But here's the kicker. You can see the body bag unzip itself. The zipper moves, slow, as if invisible fingers are pulling it down. And then the gurney rolls, just slightly, like somebody heavy got off. The nurse said she went home that morning and couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face staring at her, mouth open, eyes wide, silent. 2 weeks later, another nurse swore she saw the same man standing at the end of her hallway. Same hospital, middle of the night, his feet bare, his head tilted just slightly, watching her. When she blinked, he was gone. After that, staff started whispering about the one who wouldn't stay dead. Some said he was still wandering the halls, still trying to talk. Others said he'd never been a man to begin with, just something using his body like a mask. The nurse who told the story swears she'll never work another night shift again.
She said, "It wasn't a second chance at life. Whatever got up off that gurney, it wasn't him."